Hi there, Tian. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Alexander. Hey, Dirk.
Good morning.
Good to see you.
See you all. How are you?
Morning. Good.
Morning.
We are getting people in the room, so we'll give it another 30 seconds and then we'll get started. And for those of you that are in time, welcome to the webinar launch of the ICAP ETS Status Report 2022. We'll wait 30 more seconds and then we'll get started. And welcome to all the speakers and panelists, obviously. Thanks for being on time. Good. I think we can get slowly started now. We do have a critical mass in the room. So welcome everyone from me, but also on behalf of the ICAP Secretariat, ICAP members and observers to the second webinar we're holding this year to launch the ICAP ETS Status Report 2022. It's always a big moment in the year for ICAP. First of all, because it is obviously a big product that we release every year, but it's also an important time to use the launch and the publication of the status report as a chance to sit down 1 second, look back at what happened over the last 12 months and take stock of developments in the world of carbon markets. And this is pretty much what we would like to do today. Before we get to the agenda and to the content of today's webinar, I just also wanted to say a quick note of introduction for those of you that might not be familiar with ICAP. So ICAP stands for the International Carbon Action Partnership, and we are an international forum that brings together 40 different national and subnational governments that basically get together to jointly work on the implementation of emission trading systems. ICAP brings together governments from different levels of governance, as you can see in the blue box, and governments that basically span the globe, as you can see on the map. And what those governments have in common are that they are either already using or planning to use an emission trading system as a way to put a price on CO2 emissions and as a way to reduce those emissions over time. In ICAP, we tend to group our activities around three main work streams or three main pillars. We do technical dialogue, which consists of research on ETS related topics and discussion with ICAP members and observers. We do capacity building aimed at promoting the readiness to implement new emission trading systems in jurisdictions that are taking steps to set one up. And we do knowledge sharing in the sense that we gather information about emission trading systems, and we make that information readily available to the public. And the release of the ICAP status report is the main piece of work under our knowledge sharing side of activities. It is the ICAP main and flagship publication every year. And what it does is that it brings together, sums up, and explains the key developments that took place over the previous 12 months in the world of emission trading systems. So if you look at what is in it, we do have a foreword by the ICAP co-chairs that distill the key messages coming out from the report. We do have a set of 6 signed articles from key ETS experts and policy practitioners that reflect on some of the key developments in the world of emission trading systems. We have infographics, which you will see in today's presentation, that convey in a visual way some of the key trends for emissions trading. And then in the bulk part of the report, we do have detailed fact sheets that cover every single ETS in force, under development, or being considered worldwide. So it is an important resource for anyone working on emission trading systems. It's, again, an important publication that we are really proud of. And we are having this webinar today because yesterday we launched the 2022 edition that looks back at developments in the world of ETS over the last 12 months. So what we would like to do today is to have a bit of a presentation about what are the key highlights from from this year's report, and I will have my colleague we will have my colleague Alex and Anastasia that will walk you through some of what we think are the key messages coming out from the status report. And then, as I said, the publication of the status report is always a good opportunity to have a bit of a reflection on what are the key trends and developments that characterize the world of emissions trading. So we brought together a great panel with who we can discuss some of the key trends that emerged from the report, as well as some of the key developments in their jurisdictions. If you look at the set of speakers we have on the panel, you'll see that they all come from jurisdictions that have really interesting developments over the course of 2021. So we'll have first a bit of a discussion on the broader report, but then we'll also start to dive into what their jurisdictions have to say and to share about ETS developments over the course of last year. And then we'll obviously take time after the panel discussion for a Q&A with the audience. So feel free, as we go through the presentation and as we go through the panel discussion, to start sending questions through the Q&A function of the webinar. And we'll get to those in the last segment of today's webinar. With that, I think it's time to start diving into the actual substance. So I'll give the floor to my colleagues Alex and Anastasia to walk us through some of the key highlights from this year's report. And before I do that, I just also wanted to say a massive thank you to the ICAP team that again did a great job on delivering the report, but also a big thank you to the ICAP members and observers that provided input, to the broader community of ETS policymakers that contributed to the report, and also to all the experts that we've been in touch with as we worked on the ETS status report. Thank you all, and please enjoy today's discussion. Alex, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Stefano. So yeah, there's certainly a lot to unpack in this year's status report. So Anastasia and I are going to go over some of the just a selection of excerpts from the report. Everybody actually is going to find different and interesting elements. So if you show us the next slide there, Stefano, what we found across our team working on this is that there's 3 key messages for us that have come out of the report. So the first key message we find is that ETS is increasingly becoming a key policy instrument for reaching net zero goals. So governments around the world, they're undertaking reforms to align their systems with their higher level net zero targets. And this is a clear trend that we're seeing and a really promising one as well. Secondly, so 2021, looking back, seems to have been in many cases a year of consolidation and also reform for ETS globally. So what we see is that different ETS systems, many of the well-established ones and newly established, are actually maturing, and then building on this sort of the ongoing reforms of the past years actually are now functioning really much more robustly, and what we're seeing building on this is now reforms are now paving the way for even more robust and more ambitious systems to be improved and developed. The third key point that we're seeing is that this increased robustness of ETS has resulted actually in record carbon prices, and therefore also record carbon pricing revenues. So prices have risen across the board, actually across all established systems, generating record revenues. So and these revenues, of course, are being directed to further climate action. So this is also a really promising trend that we see. So on the next slide, we're going to get into some of the infographics that are in the report. So in this infographic, we're looking at the relationship of over the last year net zero targets and ETS. And comparing 2020 to 2021, so we see the coverage of net zero targets really increased dramatically last year, increasing from just over 50% of global GHG emissions at the end of 2020 to around 90% at the end of 2021. So this really came on the back of strong momentum for net zero targets being set that was created at COP26. So these targets, now these are high-level net zero targets, now need to be translated into adequate policy measures, and we see that emissions trading really has a key role to play here. So what we see is that ETS around the world are covering over 1/3 of emissions that are captured by net zero targets, which are enshrined in law. So those are net zero targets in law. The ETS is playing a greater role in these, particularly 17% of the emissions captured by net zero targets that are under discussion. So this indicates there's a clear direction of travel for those countries that are in the process of translating their recently adopted net zero targets or putting them into law, putting them then into concrete policy measures. On the next slide, we're actually going to sort of dig into a few of the details, look at the current state of play for ETS worldwide. So there are now 25 systems in force. So this is up from 24 in 2020. 7 systems have been developed. This was 8 last year. 1 moved into force, and 15 are now under consideration, up from 14 last year. So we see there's a lot to unpack, and this is summarized really nicely in the executive summary of the report. Yeah, we could spend a lot of time here, but here's some of the more interesting developments that took place in 2021. So taking a look, first of all, at the European Union. So following the release of the Fit for 55 package in July, a comprehensive reform package is underway to align the EU ETS with the new EU-wide 2030 climate targets. So the proposed reforms include adjustments to the cap and to the market stability reserve. They see new benchmarks, the inclusion of the maritime sector, proposals for a carbon border adjustment, and a separate fuel ETS for buildings and road transport. This is why, if you look closely, you can actually see a green border around the whole of Europe now. Zooming in on Germany. So Germany last year successfully launched its national ETS. It covers fuels from the transport and building sector upstream, and thereby complements the EU ETS. So in 2021, regulated entities in Germany opened registry compliance accounts. They started monitoring their emissions and purchased their first allowances from the exchange or other authorized intermediaries. Moving across To the east, China's national ETS, the world's largest actually in terms of covered emissions at 4.5 billion tons of carbon dioxide, really kicked into operation in 2021. So particularly with the trading of allowances starting in July. Also throughout 2021, there's been a series of ETS policy documents on key design elements, such as MRV, market operation, were also finalized. So this really sees really concrete progress happening in China's national ETS. Down there in the bottom right corner, New Zealand, 2021 was a year of really of implementing major reforms for the New Zealand ETS. This followed on from the passing of the Climate Change Response Amendment Act in 2020. The reforms include putting a cap on unit supply and the introduction of an auctioning mechanism. So auctioning began the first auction in March 2021. There was a transition from a fixed price option, which previously acted as a price ceiling, to be replaced with a cost containment reserve. And robust demand saw that the cost containment reserve price was actually triggered later in the year. So really a lot of developments happening in that part of the world. Also, I'd like to zoom in here on Indonesia. So now Indonesia has an ETS under development now. So after a voluntary intensity-based ETS pilot for the power sector, which took place between April and August 2021, the much anticipated presidential regulation on the economic value of carbon was signed in October, and this really will serve as the legal framework for Indonesia's carbon pricing instruments. And interestingly, what is under development there is a hybrid cap, trade and tax system, which has been announced to start in April 2022. Like I said, there's many more other details in the map there. I'd invite you all to take a look at the status report and to zoom in on these, and I'm sure you'll find other really interesting developments there. So if we take a look at the next slide, we're looking here at the sort of a history of global expansion of ETS. So what we see, ETS coverage has grown from 5% back in 2005, sorry, all the way to 17% now at the beginning of 2022. As mentioned, Oregon was the only new system that came online in 2021. We've gone from 24 to 25 systems now in force. Some key figures here. So jurisdictions making up more than half of the global GDP are using emissions trading in their jurisdictions now, and almost 1/3 of the global population now lives in a jurisdiction with an ETS in force. I'd like now to hand over to my colleague Anastasia, who's going to dig a bit further into the details.
Yes, thank you very much, Alex. Now that we have got a good overview of the general developments, I would like to dig deeper into 3 important topics of our status report. So the first topic that has been important this year is the topic of sectoral coverage, meaning which sectors are covered by an emissions trading system. This has been a key topic in Europe, for example. As Alex showed previously, Germany has launched an ETS for fuels, and the EU has set out proposals for both including maritime transport in the EU ETS, as well as to set up a second European ETS for building and road transports. So yeah, it's important to look at the state of play here. This graphic on the slide clearly shows the diversity of ETSs in the world, depending on design choices, on local circumstances, and on the exact purpose of the systems. And most systems currently in operation cover emissions from the power and industrial sectors. At the same time, the sectoral coverage of several ETSs expands to other sectors as well, as shown on the slide. The share of emissions covered by an ETS and the point of regulation, whether upstream or downstream, differs significantly across the systems. And the share of emissions covered ranges all the way from 11% in Regia and Switzerland to 85% in jurisdictions like Nova Scotia. Some systems are only downstream, such as the EU ETS. Other systems are upstream, like Germany, and others are mixed, like California and Quebec. So coming to the second aspect that has known key developments in 2021, those are the allowance prices. On this graphic, we look back at the period after 2008. And as you can see, prices have been steadily increasing in several systems since 2018 and 2019. And this trend has increased in pace in 2021, especially in Europe, and prices have reached new all-time records. This has been an important topic in the news this year, as you have probably all seen. New ETS have also started trading, as you can see on this graphic, in 2021, and Alex has mentioned it as well. So it's the UK, Germany, and China. So the third and last topic I would like to present today that has been key for emissions trading systems this year are the auctioning revenues. In 2021, higher prices have generated record revenues. Last year alone, global ETS have raised $58 billion in auctioning revenues, which brought the total since 2008 to $161 billion at the end of 2021. So this is a growth of over 50% in just 1 year. In other words, 1/3 of all revenues generated by all ETSs since 2008 was collected just last year. Record prices in the European Union ETS meant that auctions generated a revenue, so in the European Union, of over $35 billion in 2021. And in Germany alone, where the allowance sales started halfway through the year, they generated close to 15% of the global revenues in 2021. So another example I would like to mention here is New Zealand. New Zealand started to auction allowances in 2021 and raised almost $1 billion in 1 year. And revenues generation is a crucial aspect of an ETS, as they can be invested to further climate action or assist industry and consumers, as we show on this graphic. So with those 3 main points in mind, I am now going to hand back to Alex for a quick overview of ICAP's key tools and publications. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Anastasia. Yeah, we're just going to take this opportunity to plug some of our other publications and tools that we've been working with. So what we see here in the top left is our website and map. We are in fact launching a revamped website just next week. So this has been going on in the background as well. While we've been developing the status report, we've also been developing a new website. Yeah, we invite everybody to come and take a look at our new website next week. In particular, the new ETS the ETS map, where the information from the fact sheets in the status report is put into this interactive map as well. We are also providing news coverage, also with a quarterly newsletter. We are producing information briefs on ETS, introducing the basics. You can find all of the infographics there as well out of the report, and also some of our key publications, so such as the status report, but also, for example, the ETS handbook produced together with the PMR. We also have our tool, which actually tracks historical allowance prices. This is the Interactive Allowance Price Explorer, which is all available on our website. Yeah, please do come and make use of these tools and download the publications. Thanks a lot for that. So I think this covers our brief overview of the status report and our key messages that we pulled out. We'd now like to move on to panel discussion. So I'd like to, first of all, I'd like to introduce our panel for the day. Like Stefano mentioned, we have a really fantastic panel With us today, we have Julia Ziemann, who's a policy officer for ETS, policy coordination and international carbon markets at the European Commission. We have Dirk Weinreich, who is our new ICAP co-chair and also head of division of climate legislation and emissions trading at the new Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action in Germany. We're very pleased to welcome James Coombs, who's a manager of ETS at the Climate Change Directorate at the Ministry for Environment of New Zealand, and also Jianguo Chang, the Deputy General Manager of Sino-Carbon Innovation and Investment in China. So yeah, I'd like to first of all say thank you all very much for joining us. Before we get into your updates, I'd just like to ask for each of you to, if you have some brief reflections basically on the overview of the status report as you've seen this and the key trends and messages that we've pulled out. Is there anything that you'd like to reflect on, or any thoughts that just come off the top of your head? So maybe I could ask Julia to speak a few reflections if you have some.
Thank you very much, Alex, and hello to everyone who's tuning in for the second webinar launch. Let me start by congratulating the whole team and Stefano as well on the work that is put into the status report, because it's another one in the collection, and I think it was visible from yesterday's webinar as well that it's widely popular. Both among practitioners, but also just people taking interest in carbon pricing, and there's more and more of those as well. I think that with the 2022 edition, it's the encouraging messaging that I noted about more and more countries committing to long-term strategies on climate action. But definitely the experience from the EU shows that it is translating those long-term objectives into near-term policies that is really important and very often challenging. And carbon pricing, at least from our perspective, should play a big part in this translation, not only to implement the polluter pays principle, but also to recycle important revenues for furthering climate action. So with this, it's really encouraging that more and more jurisdictions are deciding to do this, or even scaling up. It is also encouraging that those that are scaling up are also maintaining resilience of their systems, and definitely the exchange of experiences via ICAP and other forums really helps ensure that robustness. But the report does note one challenge for all carbon pricing moving forward, and that's maintaining public acceptance of climate policies moving forward, and also leveraging them to address social impacts. This has been particularly visible in the EU in the last year or so. First with the pandemic, then the gas price situation, and also now the war in Ukraine. Sorry. And I think that the Commission has been quite clear on this. A clean energy transition is essential to developing a sustainable, resilient and cost-effective economy, and the ETS is a big part of this. So I think I'll leave it here and welcome the discussion later.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Julia. You definitely touched on a lot of really interesting discussion points that you're really happy to pick up later. I'd like to go around the panel first of all and ask for some further first reflections. Maybe I could ask Dirk Weinreich to reflect, having both the view of Germany, which you'll be able to share shortly, but maybe taking also the view of the ICAP co-chair. What do you see as some of these key messages and developments that are coming out of the status report?
Yeah, thank you very much, and good morning and hello to everybody. A warm welcome also from my side as one of the ICAP co-chairs. I'm quite glad to that we successfully launched another version of this important status report. congratulations, of course, to the whole ICAP team. It's always quite hard work to gather all the data and exact information that we see in the report to publish this great overview on the global emissions ETS-related developments during the last 12 months. It's the status report has become really one of the flagship publications of ICAP, and it's a really useful reference book and source of information for everyone. There are two aspects I want to highlight from my side. I think the report shows quite clearly that emissions trading becomes more and more a key policy instrument in climate, the addressing of climate change. The status report clearly shows a positive trend regarding the announcement of net zero goals and applying ambitious carbon pricing policies. And it's not surprising that the share of emissions covered by ETS is particularly high amongst those jurisdictions who want to become climate neutral by the mid of this century. It is really an important tool to apply emissions trading. It's clearly that setting a cap can help really to achieve emissions targets. And of course, also emissions trading, as we all know, helps to decarbonize in a transparent manner and also in an efficient manner. The prices, it was mentioned, are rising in all matured ETSs. The good side is clearly it's creating incentives, more and more incentives, and also creating great revenues. We know that, especially in Europe. You've seen the figures. And also in Germany. Of course, in the given situation, it's a bit maybe problematic. It's clearly that we have to use our revenues wisely. Normally, as you may know, in Germany, we use 100% of our revenues for climate change efforts, but also it's clearly that we might use some to address some concerns as indirect leakage, and now maybe also more and more to address some social effects. Julia already mentioned that. So it's very important that in this phase all major fora stress that we should not go to a turnaround, because the ETS prices are not the problem of the current energy price crisis. Maybe they are more of a part of the solution. So we will have to keep the course, but of course we have to address social aspects very wisely in the coming months. I think I will leave it with that for the moment. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dirk, for those reflections. I'd also then ask also Tian or James if you have also any first impressions on some of the messages coming out of the report.
Yeah, kia ora koutou. Hello, everyone. I think a lot, first of all, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak with you and to hear from different jurisdictions around their journeys, and also ICAP team for providing such a fantastic resource that we can leverage. I think a lot of great points have already been covered by Julia and Dirk. I think the thing from my perspective, is the key messages really resonate from where I'm sitting around, especially as we move from the early days where there were 2 or 3 of us in 2008, where we started off the ETS, now getting to a point where there are many different jurisdictions at different areas of maturity. That creates amazing diversity of experience, new thinking that we can leverage, which is why having a global organization which is connecting us together is so important, so that we can share these opportunities, these learnings into the way we do things. Because as Dirk was just mentioning, with rising emissions pricing creates other matters that we need to consider, very socio-economic, and how do we use the revenue from ETSs to not only address climate change and support those policies, but also ensure that there's an equity and just transition within how our ETSs are operating. I also think there's a lot of opportunity as well with climate change being a global issue. How do we actually link and cooperate together and make sure that we design our ETSs in a way which is aligned to allow us to actually work in a more cooperative manner? It's the key point around price is very significant, not just for European Union and Germany, but also in the UK, but also for New Zealand. We're a very small country of 5 million people, so that close to $1 billion worth of revenue actually has a big impact, which makes it even more interesting for how do we manage that in a just transition manner. But overall, I think for me, it was great, great key messages that we are seeing a more global movement here, but I'm really excited about how we can, encourage and how the countries that are more mature support those who are at that early stage and get them off the ground. But yeah, that's sort of my take on the key messages.
Great, thanks a lot, James. Is there something you'd like to add, Tian?
Yeah, thank you, Alex, and thank you very much for the invitation, and also congratulations for the report launch. I think in China we draws a lot of attention, and on the Chinese cover market, I think we did contribute a signed article which really gave a very comprehensive coverage about what is latest development. I think I would like to add more is that the first compliance circle in China does mean that we are still in the learning by doing and the step-by-step progressive work of building a national emission trading scheme. And we still need, there was a lot of work to be done. We still need a lot of work to clarify what is the policy, long-term policy, and the policy clarity, and also the designing elements of the national emission trading scheme to aligning the policy instrument with our national climate goal. So there was still a lot more to do, and we are very happy that we could continue keep following on this and sharing with our partners. Thank you.
Fantastic, thanks a lot, Chen. Yeah, there's a lot of different impressions and a lot of different messages actually that can be taken from this, and you see also everybody reflects also on their own perspective as well, where when they look into such a report that has such a broad global and diverse view as well. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to ask actually the panelists to give a short just a few minutes review of the latest developments actually from their perspective as policymakers in your jurisdictions, working with ETS. I'd like to once again go around the room, this time with a bit more of a sort of your policymaker perspective and your work, your current work and prospects within your jurisdiction. So if I may, I'd like to begin once again with you, Julia. If you'd like to kick us off. You already mentioned some of the key developments, but and I know there are many actually. It's a really active time, and you've been all been extremely busy over this last year. I don't know if you can cover all these developments in the next 2 to 3 minutes, but I'd ask you to pick a few of the key developments to share with us.
Thank you, Alex. And it's true. It's been a very, very busy year in the Commission. And probably the work can be split twofold. One part is policy development. So in 2021, the EU has worked precisely on what I mentioned in the reactions, extending the long-term policy framework and then translating it into the necessary policy reforms near term. And it started off with the adoption of the first in EU history European climate law, which lays down 2 targets, climate neutrality by 2050 for the EU and higher emissions reductions by 2030. That is of at least 55% compared to 1990 levels. And just for reference, our previous targets target for 2030 was 40%. And with that, the Commission put forward an extensive package of policy reforms, as you have rightly mentioned, to align the instruments that we already have in place with that, with delivering that ambition by 2030. And of course, the EU ETS is at the heart of this. Its contribution to the emissions reductions is increased. The Commission proposed extending the EU ETS to the maritime sector, making the free allocation more targeted, also increasing the funds for low carbon innovation and modernization of energy sectors in lower income member states. And in parallel, the Commission put forward a proposal for a second ETS for fuels used in buildings and road transport. And there, linking to this social agenda, this proposal is complemented by a new fund, the Social Climate Fund, that would help address the impacts of the carbon price on the most vulnerable groups. Linking those two branches, so to speak, is the proposal to commit all auction revenues from emissions trading to climate action. Indeed, the experience, as Dirk has mentioned, is quite encouraging. Germany is directing 100%, the EU average is 75%, but of course the average hides both quite ambitious allocations and slightly less so. So I think that making sure that these resources are used effectively and in a way that avoids carbon lock-in and stranded assets is really, really important to ensure a green, just transition that progresses gradually and not in a very rushed manner. Not to do it injustice, but the policy development is just one part of the story. The other part is the resilience check, and the resilience check of EU's commitment to climate action and the EU ETS itself. And this resilience check was prompted by the crises that we have experienced and that were already mentioned. So the pandemic, the energy price hikes, and the war in Ukraine, and of course, these crises have prompted some doubts around prioritizing climate action, and the Commission has addressed those at the beginning of this month, proposing in the short term diversifying gas imports to the EU to become independent from Russia, but in the long term we continue to call for a clean energy transition, not only to reduce emissions, but precisely to improve EU's energy security and to mitigate energy price hikes. And as far as the resilience check of the ETS is concerned, with the high energy prices, we have heard calls about speculation being part of shaping the price trends in the EU ETS. And while the prices have indeed been record high and increased substantially in 2021, the Commission again explained the factors behind this increase. The main factors are increased demand linked to the economic recovery post the pandemic, this counterintuitive gas to coal switch caused by the situation in the gas market, and finally, stakeholders factoring in this perspective of ambition increase in 2030. Again, the Commission urged what exactly Dirk has alluded to. ETS provides revenues that can be used short-term to alleviate the social pressures, but also long-term to deliver the clean energy transition. And with that, I think it's also important to bear in mind what Dirk has also already said, that the ETS is part of the solution, not the problem. The report by the European Securities and Markets Authority, published just this Monday, confirms that it works well, that it's a robust market, that of course, reacts to what is going on in the world, but the report maintains that the stakeholders and installations should have confidence in how it works and how it delivers.
Thanks a lot, Yuri, for those reflections. That's really very interesting. I would then pass over to Dirk. I'm sure you have also some thoughts on from the European perspective, but I'd also like to hear also your perspective from Germany as well. Both has been implemented in the EU ETS, but also with the new German ETS for fuels as well. Please take the floor, Dirk.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well, perfectly.
Okay, let me start with the developments in Germany. In 2021, we had to revise our Climate Change Act due to a decision of our Constitutional Court. And Germany was taking the opportunity, the former government, the Grand Coalition took the opportunity to really implement a strong climate goal to be climate neutral by 2045 already. And also have some negative emissions thereafter. And we have ambitious goals for 2030 and 2040 also. So complementing that, our fuel emissions trading system, which was already mentioned, successfully was launched in 2020. It is directed to the combustion of fuels in all sectors not covered by the EU ETS, as you may know. It's an upstream system addressing fuel distributors and suppliers that are covered, and mainly addressing, of course, transport and heating sector, but also small industry, which are not in the European ETS. And in 2021, what happened? Of course, we continued to build up the system. We needed to launch subordinate regulations on carbon leakage compensation, the determination of the cap, the avoidance of hardships, and so on. Some of these are still under the competitiveness control by the DG competition of the European Commission. We hope that this is finalized soon. And in parallel, we are continuing to build up the administrative infrastructures, which is not an easy job, but is going on and on. We already, it was mentioned, sold first certificates into the market, and in 2022 now, our first emissions reports of the suppliers have to be submitted by 31st July of 2022 of this year. Yeah, maybe that's the main thing. The new coalition did not decide to raise fixed prices. We have fixed prices during the initial period until 2025. But this is due to the worsening global crisis, an energy crisis, and maybe it was now a wise decision as unfortunately the war in Ukraine came additionally on that. Just to mention that also the government took, of course, new measures to lower the burden adopted, the burden by the energy crisis now due to the war in Ukraine. We will have a reduced energy taxation and reduced fees for public transport, for instance. To complement or to amend Julia's excellent report on the European level, just let me say that we support, the new government supports the Fit for 55 package of the European Commission. Our intention is clearly to further strengthen the current ETS. We welcome the expansion of the scope to maritime transport. And also, of course, we want to establish a second ETS on fuels. Why a second one? It's clear that given the different range of price levels between transport and households on the one side and energy and industry on the other side, we seem that it's wise to start with a separate system, but of course in the long term it could be merged to one system. And it will be, for compliance reason, it should be of course under the roof of a common European ETS directive. Two issues are especially relevant from our perspective, from the German perspective, of course. We want to raise the ambition also for industry, but of course we also want to safeguard the competitiveness. We know that cost reallocation might phase out in the long run, so we also supported the CBAM to safeguard the raised ambition for industry. And just to add this, already now as a trade export dependent economy, we of course want to avoid trade problems with our partners. So we will like to supplement this CBAM by an open, multilateral and integrative carbon club. The second one, it's very important from our perspective to establish a second UE ETS on fuels for road transports and buildings. And we even prefer to also include small industries. So every fuel should be, every fossil fuels should be covered by a price in the long run. We know that there are some serious concerns of other member states on the social aspects, but we believe that these aspects could be addressed either by common European measures. We might be skeptical on the social climate fund, but there could be alternatives. And what is also clear, the huge revenues, as I mentioned earlier, will enable every member states to properly address these social effects. So I leave it with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dirk. I'd like now to hand the microphone over to James Coombs to reflect on the developments over the last year and also the prospects of the New Zealand ETS.
Yeah, kia ora koutou. So good evening, everyone from Aotearoa, New Zealand. So New Zealand's emissions trading scheme is a key tool to meet New Zealand's domestic and international climate change targets, including our 2050 targets set by the Climate Change Response Act 2002. Under our 2050 target, biogenic methane emissions must be reduced at least 10% below 2017 levels by 2030 and 24 to 47% below 17 levels and beyond 2050. All other greenhouse gases must reach net zero by and beyond 2050. So in light of 2021, I think after the establishment of the NZ ETS itself in 2008, I'd say that this was the most exciting year since then, due to the materiality of the changes which came into effect for our New Zealand emissions trading scheme. As Alex referred to in the opening, the biggest of these was in the introduction of the ETS auctions. So in 2021, 4 ETS auctions were held on a quarterly basis, and these auctions are operated jointly by the New Zealand Stock Exchange and the European Energy Exchange on behalf of the New Zealand government. The auctions replaced the previous fixed price auction, which was around $35 for 2020 per tonne of emissions, and auction unit volume is aligned to the cap of units with consideration to the New Zealand emission budget, and annual unit supply and price control setting recommendations are provided to the government by the Independent Climate Change Commission. So for 2021, a total of 19 million NZUs were auctioned across the four auctions. And as Alex mentioned, in the third auction in September, the cost containment reserve trigger price was hit with sufficient bids to release the full CCR reserve of 7 million additional units. And the CCR trigger price for 2021 was set at 50 New Zealand dollars. The total revenue for that year, as mentioned earlier around, was 1.3 billion New Zealand dollars, which equates to just under $1 billion US dollars. In response to the Climate Change Commission's recommendations, we also implemented new regulations, which revised our CCR, Cost Containment Reserve trigger price for 2022 from $50 to 70, and the price floor from 20 to 30 New Zealand dollars. Another big change in 2021 was how ETS revenue will be spent. Up until this year, the ETS proceeds were transferred into the general government treasury budget. However, in December 2021, the New Zealand government announced it would be spending the proceeds from the emissions trading scheme on emissions reduction programs from budget 22 onwards. This budget is called the Climate Emergency Response Fund, and it is the mechanism through which we will do this. And the fund has been established with a $4.5 billion New Zealand fund, which is based on the next 4 years projected ETS revenue. The key strategy to which this fund will be applied will be the first emissions reduction plan, which is due to be published at the end of May. Another area of key change was around industrial allocation, with 2 key developments to note. The first was in 2021, industrial allocation phase down rates came into effect by reducing the levels of assistance by 1% per year from 2021 to 2030, 2 percentage points for the years 2031 to 2040, and 3 percentage points per year from 2041 to 2050. The second development with industrial allocation is that we consulted on options to address over-allocation, as there was evidence to suggest that some industries are receiving NZU allocations greater than intended to address leakage and reduce the risk of relocation overseas. Why is this a problem? Well, over-allocation makes it harder for us to meet our future climate change targets and emission budgets, but also puts unnecessary pressure on other sectors to reduce emissions and is an ongoing fiscal cost to the government. We are looking to update industrial allocation policy to address over-allocation by updating allocation calculations with new baseline years, reassessing eligibility with new baseline years and updating eligibility criteria, and making some other minor amendments such as streamlining processes and reporting of allocation data. Results from this consultation, alongside further policy analysis, will inform what policy changes are then made in mid-22, with actual changes to take effect from not until 2024. Market governance was also a key area of focus for us. We need to improve our market governance frameworks to manage the risks of misconduct in the NZ ETS and protect our users from financial harm, as it is currently patchy and there's no regulator overseeing the market. We are looking to set up a comprehensive framework and appoint a regulator, as it is important for the integrity and efficiency of our scheme. It promotes confidence in market trading and reduces the risk of misconduct that distorts the price of our New Zealand units. So we sought public feedback on 4 key areas: the governance of advice, governance of trading, governance of market conduct, and the options around appointing a regulator. The last area that I'll just provide an update is our revised NDC and international linking. So in November of 2021, the government announced a revised 2030 NDC for New Zealand under the 2015 Paris Agreement, a reduction in net emissions of 50% below 2005 gross emissions. New Zealand listed the reformed ETS as a key policy tool for ensuring we achieve our New Zealand's NDC. Our cabinet, our government agreed to update our position on international market negotiations, and we confirmed that our first priority was domestic climate action to help meet New Zealand's climate change targets. But in addition to transitioning the economy into taking domestic action, New Zealand plans to use offshore mitigation with environmental integrity towards meeting our NDC 1. So we will be seeking a range of potential options for sourcing offshore mitigation with environmental integrity and prioritising partnering with countries in Asia Pacific in ways that promote sustainable development outcomes and resilience. We will also be exploring reopening the New Zealand ETS to international markets with environmental integrity through ETS linking. So those are just some of the key changes. So yeah, that's it for the minute.
Thanks very much, James. I'd now hand over to Jianko Cheng. Also an exciting year, I think, for carbon markets in China. Please take the floor, Chen, and give us your impression and your view from on these developments and prospects.
Yeah, thank you. I think that we are really in a very iterative approach of developing a national emission trading market, and what have happened can be understood as a trial phase, the first trial phase for the last year's compliance, and we are still, I think, need more trial operation, because if you look into the details, for example, what is the allocation for the next compliance period, it has not been clear yet. How long will be the next compliance cycle? It is also not clear yet. And what will be the role of offsetting? It has not been cleared yet. What will be the improvement of the data reporting and verification? Not cleared yet. When the trading, the investors will be allowed to participate in the trading market is also not clear yet. So it looks like, you know, everything is just like a step-by-step approach. Next year is really they are planning to incorporate more sectors, but what kind of sectors will be expanded to include into the market is also not clearly announced yet. So there was so many uncertainties, and I think that what we need is that we anticipate that the government will have a long-term policy certainty, which will be the symbol that China has moved from a pilot or trial operation phase to a full functional national carbon market. If we don't have a long-term certainty, in particular the policy certainty, we cannot say that we already have a full functioning national emission trading market in the place yet. So taking back to the uncertainty, I also noticed that there was also one question regarding the CCER, and you know, there was announcement that informal announcement that the CCER will be relaunched this year, but this is also something looks like it has not been guaranteed, and it's not really certain when the CCER, the offsetting mechanism, will be relaunched yet. And we have so many problems. For example, what will be the offsetting rule? What kind of project will be allowed? Because we have so many methodologies. Almost all the CDM methodologies is included in the CCER methodology. But what kind of projects will be allowed to enter into the offsetting market for the compliance purpose is not clear yet. One of the remarkable questions is, for example, is about hydro, and also recently is solar and wind power, for example, because China is really developing a national renewable power market to support the development of renewable power, to fulfill the long-term climate target, to build a carbon neutral society in the future. So we are having a lot of policies to support the development of renewable energies. But we have a green power certificate scheme. We have the power market is now arranging the direct purchasing of renewable power, directly purchasing of renewable power. And in the future, the regional governments will be incorporating, accounting renewable power into its overall carbon emission policy mix. So there will be a lot of methodology adjustment, and there will be a lot of policy coordination. And there was one consensus that the solar power and wind power, they cannot benefit from multiple policies. If we go for the CCER, we cannot get any let them to get any advantage of subsidies, or they can no longer sell the green power certificates. So there will be avoidance of duplication and avoidance of multiple regulation. So these are key questions that we are still running and still need to be resolved. But looks like that if China's power carbon market, for example, we have been covered 4.5 billion tons of CO2 emissions into the trading market. If we allow 5% of these emissions being offsetted by the CCR, which means that we're going to create 200 million tons of CCR every year, and which means that the CCR is really have a lot of potential. So we anticipate that CCR in the future will be a lot of incentive for people to develop CCR projects. But there was the risk, because the risk is that there was policy uncertainty about what kind of projects will be allowed. So far, the capacity, for example, the capacity is that in the past 5 years of the CCR operation, we have been issued 50 million tons of CCR credits. But compared to 200 million CCR credits each year, which is needed, looks like the capacity of supplying is still limited. So there is some of the contradictory messages about whether we should put more stringent eligibility criteria, or given the current capacity to supply, we should allow more projects to be allowed into the market. So I think the policy will be depend on a lot of debate. For example, the supply and the demand of the market, the eligibility, and also the environmental integrity of the offsetting scheme, because the CCR is now have been linked to the CORSIA under the ICAO system, and we need to follow the international principles of eligibility criteria. So there will be some of the mixed uncertainties, and it is really something that we deserve to be followed and to be assessed. Lastly, is that also there will be some of the risk, for example, because under the Paris Agreement, the Article 6, there will be, if China to participate into the international carbon trading, there will be the rule of avoiding of double counting and the corresponding adjustment. The rule of corresponding adjustment will affect how the policies will be defined, because there is already one of the policies in Fujian province which restrict the local forestry to participate into registered into a VCS or other international standards, and the trade of these credits under the international standards into the foreign market, and this is a concern. This creates the concern, and we are worried that in the future, if the CA corresponding adjustment has not been addressed properly, which will deter the participation of the Chinese projects into the international carbon market, and this has already been created a lot of debate. So I think that the whole Chinese market designing and also the policies is under the review, and we hope that with this year we will see some of the progress. But I think I would be interested to keep you updated and on what is going on, and I would be happy to keep contacted. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Tian. Yeah,
I see Dirk is smiling because he has been thinking that every time he's anticipating more certainty, but I'm sorry that I did not fail to give you more certainty and clarity, and I hope that the next time I will give you more.
But not to discount the progress that has actually been made. So the future is uncertain, but actually there's already really some fantastic developments that have been made actually. So thanks a lot, Tian. I would like to turn now to to the audience, so we can open up the panel and discuss some of the questions that have been raised by the audience. I see, Chan, you've already actually answered one of the questions that was directed to you regarding China's CCER market. I'd like to open this up a little bit more sort of broadly and maybe more at the conceptual level as well. I've got two questions here which overlap somewhat. So one from Chasativa and another one from Bill Shaw. So these two questions go in a similar direction. So Chasativa asks, how is it that the price has risen across the board quite significantly in 2021? What are the reasons behind it? And then on the other side, if in the next few years the price drops, what would be the impacts for the ETS? What Bill is asking though is that also something I think that Julia touched on, that with volatile economic growth prospects globally and other uncertainties, more pressure to drive economic growth for most jurisdictions, do you see that there will be less emphasis on ETS? So I think together these two questions sort of asking you to reflect on what's driving prices in the ETS, but what could potentially happen in the next few years, not just for prices, but actually for the role of ETS in jurisdictions and around the world. And I think Julia, you touched on this briefly earlier in one of your comments, but I think Dirk would also be in a position to answer these questions as well. I would also open up this, it's quite a conceptual question, so I'd open this up to other panels as well, just for your opinions.
Right, so I got cold, but I can mainly just echo what I have said before. You know, the EU ETS has been in operation for 15 years, over 15 years now, really, and you know, its performance has improved over time. You know, we very much sympathize with the experience in China, because it's a very lengthy process and requires a lot of commitment, dedication, and consistency. And the EU ETS isn't in the place where it's been. Wouldn't be in the place where it is today without this. You know, by 2020, the EU ETS drove emissions down by over 43% from stationary installations, and just in 2021 generated over 30 billion euros revenue. And while it is, you know, caused by record high prices, it also means that we have a record high amount to finance the transition. And there's a big conversation about the cost of the transition, but I think we are trying to reframe this around investing in the future. And with definitely the higher fossil fuel prices, the investment in lower carbon energy sources is becoming a lot more attractive, and the same goes for higher carbon prices. But in terms of the reasons, in the EU, we see three main factors. So the increased demand for allowances, prompted by the economic recovery after the pandemic, the gas to coal switching, so with the gas prices, coal becoming a more economically viable source, but at the same time more emissions intensive one, and finally stakeholders factoring in the fact that the Commission proposed tightening the cap on allowances in the EU ETS to meet the emissions reductions target by 2030. And recently, of course, the developments in Ukraine have led to some uncertainty and volatility in all markets, and the ETS is no exception. The price has dropped, but with I think also with a constructive response from the EU, it is making a gradual recovery, and I think it was around 80 euro level last week and this week also. So it's a market, but sometimes it's held to more scrutiny than any other market around. But there's definitely a good understanding of the reasons what's driving the carbon price. There's an even better understanding how to best use the resources that the market is generating, and finally there's confirmation that the market is functioning well.
Great, thanks a lot, Julia. Maybe I could hand this over to Dirk to reflect sort of on the other side of this as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you very much also to Julia. You already mentioned I think most of the reasons that we also see for the rising prices recently, which recently also dropped again a bit from nearly 99. I think was the highest one, or up to 60, down, and then 75 now. So it's an up and down, it's a market, as Julia mentioned, and it's clear that in a market, participants, and I do not mean speculators, but those who are natural intermediaries for this business, they of course calculate in speculations about expectations about what is happening in the EU, and it's clear that we will raise our ambition in the market. It's clear that we nearly double our LRF, the factor which declines the cap. And so it's clear that the prices are rising. And also, given the situation with gas, Julia mentioned that, which makes the fuel switch much more expensive. So it's clear that the prices had to rise. And they also go down in the moment where there's an economic crisis ahead, maybe, or uncertainty about this. That's also clear. That's clear market business. I know that the question, what we do about falling prices, is also some which might head to the direction, could we have some more price certainty? And I will answer that. But just to mention two of the factors where we give some more certainty, we have this market stability reserve, which is of course not price directed, but it's clearly a measure that calms down external factors, external shocks, and I think it's working quite well. It has proven that it works quite well. And also you may know that Germany is also advocating for a moderate minimum price, but maybe this is not so an important discussion at the moment in the EU level. There are many skeptics about it, and from a personal view, I can also understand that, because price certainty. Imagine that we would maybe install a price corridor, like we did in the beginning in our fuel ETS system in Germany. It would mean that we destroy the original signal of the cap constantly, and that would mean that we would partly abolish the main effect of an ETS to guarantee that a given goal, a given cap is met. So you could, of course, in a given situation, always do something about raising price certainty, but you will mainly always do it on the cost of the question of the effectiveness of the system, and that's the situation where we are in. And so we are looking, of course, in the current discussion also on clearly, our politicians are asking us. We have to look on questions, maybe also to reflect on price certainty. But once again, the main drivers of price uncertainty in the moment are not the ETS prices itself. These are other factors like the gas prices, and oil prices, and so once again, ETS in a transparent and clearly downwards leading manner will help to lead us away from the dependency on fossil fuels, and so it will help to address the problem in the long run. So this should be our first thing where we focus on, and only in the second way, of course, in a given situation, we might also discuss some elements of more price certainty, but also to stress that in the EU, with the MSR, we have an amount-based means that helps a lot in this direction. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for those answers. I think from that you can see that that ETS has a key role, has a real central role in the transition, in the low carbon transition, but it's also, like you said, is a market instrument. It's the prices fluctuate because it is a market. And I suppose then to the last part of this question will about regarding volatile economic growth. So I suppose what that means is that if economic growth does once again, as it has done in the past, drop off for not just because of a crisis, but for natural economic patterns, that the market will also react to this, I assume, and prices will also reduce in that case as well. Then what I'd like to do then is open up a couple of other topics here and questions. We still have a good 10 minutes to discuss here. I have a question here for James Coombs. This is from Anne-Louise Kofod. So James mentioned the design elements to be able to link ETS systems. So I know that you're mentioning in the last part of your update that you're talking about international linking and reaching out to for internationally sourced mitigation outcomes. So the question is, between what countries and systems would you expect linking? I would actually extend this question a little bit to say, what could that kind of linking look like for New Zealand or country in New Zealand's situation?
Yep. That's a great question, and I think it's a very live issue. So I think that the most direct answer to that point is it's very much a work in progress. The key point here is that our focus is very much around our emissions trading scheme being domestically driven in the first instance, and then and through our domestic emissions reduction plan, how do we take the the whole of New Zealand's economy in a way to reduce and transition to a low emission economy. I think we haven't landed on which countries, but I think, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, the priority area or region for us is around the Asia Pacific, once we've sort of exhausted as much domestic emission reduction as we possibly can. And then, one of the points I raised was around the key areas that we'll be focusing on is environmental integrity, but also the sustainable development principles. So I think, whilst that's still very much a global discussion, especially under Article 6, we'll be looking at things like, proper monitoring, reporting and verification, no double counting. So those general sort of principles that are being discussed at a more international level. So yeah, and I think that we are very much exploring ETS linking with other jurisdictions within the international market, once again with that sort of environmental integrity being the core sort of focus before we would start progressing negotiations.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. I mean, it's ETS and linking of ETS system has been one of the the core technical dialogue topics of ICAP for a long time now, and it's still even as the world changes, as systems mature, we are glad to see that jurisdictions are looking beyond their borders to see how that they can link with other robust systems based on principles, but also based on technical know-how. And we are also very interested in these discussions as well. So I would then like to go a little bit further around the room as well. So so we have here, I think, a couple of questions which could also could be directed at Tian, but also could be discussed across the room as well. So it's known this is a question from Prerna Chaturvedi. It's known that China has has the intention or has asked other sectors to submit emissions reports as of 2021, and that they are anticipated potentially to join the national ETS in the next few years. Could you give some ideas or outlook from China's perspective, what these sectors potentially could be, and how that sort of that process is underway? What you see actually the role of the Chinese national ETS in bringing these broader sectors in?
Okay.
Sorry, Jan, you're just on mute again.
From the yeah, okay. Thank you for the question. I think from the very beginning, China has already included 8 sectors for reporting and verification, and we have been doing this reporting and verification for years since I think we have been started collecting data for the year of 2015, 16 until and on, and every year we have been asked them to support, report the data, and also these data has been going through a third-party verification. So we kind of have some of these data, but whether these data, the quality of these data, of course, is also another complex issue, because for example, some of them are very complex sectors, for example, the chemical sector, the petrochemical sector, and the iron and the steel sector. And I think the guidelines for reporting was developed before the government have a clear plan, a clear idea about what will be the allocation methodology. So maybe there was a likelihood that the data will not support a benchmarked allocation for the chemical sector, a benchmark allocation for other sectors. As what we have been seeing is that the data we've been collected in the early years also do not support the benchmark-based power sector. So there will be a lot of work needs to be improved to what kind of additional data that we are going to have to support a specific certain kind of allocation, and what we need to improve the data template, and what will be a possible adjustment of the monitoring plan to get these data. So there was a lot of discussions about what will be the boundaries of compliance for other sectors. What will be the allocation methodology? If we need a benchmark, what will be the additional data that the current reporting scheme cannot support? So these are all very practical issues that we need to look into details. And I think the message we get from the previous work is that in the past 1 and 2 years, the competent authority is looking at the feasibility and the possibility of including aluminum, cement, and even likelihood the iron and the steel sector. So if there will be more sectors to become included into the national emission trading market, aluminum and cement will be more likely to be included earlier than other sectors. Personally, I think that it is quite challenging to include the iron and steel sector because about the data issue. But you know that even if we brought these sectors into the national carbon market, this will also mean that these sectors will also experience some of the trial operational period. So it won't kill us all, even if that it is not one fully prepared and we bring them in. So this will all depend on the political will and the political commitment of the government. And I think that there will be some of the likelihood that these 2 sectors will be included in the next compliance period. But the complexity is that because in the last year, China has been detected several cases of data fraud, which will makes the situation more complex about whether we are ready, to bring in more sectors, because we really want to make the data, the quality of data, improved, and I think this is also a very important groundwork that we need to solve and we need to improve. So it is too early to say that whether this will be affected the quick inclusion or not, but unfortunately is that I think that at least now the focus of the competent authority is that they are looking at how the quality of the data for the power sector could be improved at this stage. And with time is elapsing very quickly, I'm not sure that whether they will have enough energy and enough time to cope with the other problems. So that's my answer. So it's not very clear, but if not this year, maybe next year will be likely, and more sectors will be included in. Thank you.
Yeah, many thanks, Chen. Many thanks. Yeah, thanks for your detailed answer, and also your sort of your honest view and on the prospects there. And with this, there are a few outstanding questions from the chat, but I'm afraid I don't think we're going to get time to actually cover them. And one of these was regarding how to potentially take the complexity of an ETS to be able to simplify it for countries or regions where governance structures are generally weaker. But I think we're not going to get onto this question, I think, in the time that we have. What I would like to suggest is that we pick up these questions bilaterally after this, after the webinar is finished. What I would like to do, though, is wrap up and say many thanks to all of our panelists and all of our participants for this really engaging discussion. It's a big topic, and we've touched on a few of very interesting aspects of it today. I would like to thereby round up and wrap up this the ICAP Status Report launch webinar by once again reminding people to go onto our website and to download the latest status report and to delve into it from your own perspective, because it's a big world of ETS out there now, and there's a lot happening. You will find many details in there and many different perspectives, you will find probably your own key messages from within there. I would then also encourage you to get in contact with us if you have further questions or you would like further information as well. Please do look on our website or contact us bilaterally. With that, I would like to once again say many thanks to Julia, to Dirk, to James, and to Chen for taking the time and to sharing with us. With that, many thanks also to the participants, and I wish you all a good evening, a good day, a good night, wherever you are in the world. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you very much. Best wishes to all participants and panelists. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Looking forward to further opportunities.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much, everyone. Good night.
Bye-bye.